Chapter 5. Dizziness and Balance. The only remarkable detail about the day in May when 13-year-old Abby first felt dizzy was that it was hot. In the evening, she started to feel lightheaded, like she was going to fall over. She went to bed dizzy, and when she woke up the next day, the dizziness had not let up. It followed her through end-of-year camp, through graduation, and into the summer. Abby was a competitive skater and had signed up for intensive training in July, but she had to abandon that when she couldn't get through more than an hour on the ice without having to lie down. With the help of a physiotherapist, who thought she'd suffered a viral infection affecting her inner ear, the dizziness eventually started to go away. By September, she was back in school, back to her 6-hour-a-day training schedule, and back to competing. In mid-November, she won a gold medal in a regional competition. She landed 2 axels that day and pulled off a spin that consisted of more than a dozen consecutive tight rotations. But 4 days later, after an intensive school gym class, Abby suddenly felt dizzy again, and for a few moments she even lost consciousness. It would be the beginning of a very long, dark chapter for her and her family. Between that day in November and the following May, there would be no time when Abby didn't feel dizzy. The former figure skater could now only walk by bracing herself against a wall or holding on to another person. She attended only half days at school when she was able to attend at all. Over the course of the winter, Abby saw a pediatrician, a neurologist, a cardiologist, and a biochemical geneticist, but no one could explain what had happened or offer a solution. The family doctor suggested it was psychiatric, that she was a stressed-out teen who didn't want to go to school anymore. But Abby insists she did want to go. She just couldn't get from class to class or keep herself upright. Mental health workers who assessed her agreed with Abby that it must be physical. Then, one morning in April, Abby woke up and said, "Mom, I can't see." She suddenly had double vision so bad she could not read. Her mom called a doctor friend who advised the family to stop wasting time locally and head straight to Vancouver. The next day, Abby's 14th birthday, they made the 3-hour trek by car and ferry. The ER doctor at the hospital there was dismissive. She wondered why they'd thought she'd know more than a neurologist. Then she asked who had applied Abby's eyeliner. Abby told her that she had done it herself. The doctor replied, "Anyone who does eyeliner with that precision can't be sick." They sent her home. The family was at wit's end. Her mom was worried it was a brain tumor. Abby continued to suffer from dizziness, nausea, and double vision. She was no longer going to school at all. She just stayed home, in her room, in bed. Her mom took her back to the local emergency room and begged for a referral to an ear, nose, and throat specialist for an MRI. A few days later, the ENT ruled out a vestibular cause in less than 5 minutes and called out, "See you at the Olympics," as the teenager struggled just to walk out the office door. In the elevator, Abby's mom broke down in tears. That was our last hope. That was our last chance for a specialist to say, "Hey, this is what's going on." That was supposed to be our answer. At that point, it occurred to her that her daughter may never walk again on her own. "I'm going to have a 40-year-old living in my house, holding onto my shoulder." Abby's optometrist had noticed that although she'd never had a head injury, her symptoms were uncannily similar to those of a concussion. So he referred Abby to someone who could help with concussions. That appointment was scheduled to take place right after their appointment with the ENT, but now Abby's mom just wanted to cancel. The treatment could cost thousands of dollars, she'd been warned. "I'm not paying that kind of money to a concussion doctor," she was thinking, if she doesn't even have a concussion. But Abby convinced her to go, since they were already downtown. Abby shuffled into the office with both hands on her mother's shoulders. They filled out paperwork, and then there was some testing. I was skeptical. If something's that expensive, my husband and I don't go individually. But this was so not going to happen. It wasn't even worth him taking time off work. When the doctor started talking about changing Abby's glasses prescription, after she got new glasses just a month before, Abby's mom rolled her eyes. It wasn't until the doctor put a pair of lenses in front of Abby's eyes and she said, "I feel less dizzy," that Abby's mom perked up. After 6 months of slow deterioration, it was the first improvement of any kind to come Abby's way. I still remember the day Abby and her mom came in. I was standing in the reception area and watched as an adolescent girl, literally clinging to her mother's back, made her way across the parking lot. I had never seen anything quite that severe in someone so young. My heart went out to them. Like all the other medical specialists they'd seen, I had no clear idea about what had triggered this saga of dizziness. But what I did know was that regardless of whatever else was going on, any visual problems she might have would be making it worse. Alternatively, the visual issues may even be at the root of the problem. Either way, if I could help fix the visual issues, then her condition might not be so devastating. We take balance for granted, but it's a complicated interplay between 3 separate bodily systems. One is the vestibular system, This includes the complex apparatus in each inner ear, which allows us to detect gravity, linear acceleration, and rotation. Another is our muscles and joints, which play a role in what's called proprioception. They send feedback to the brain about where our body parts are. The neck can be particularly important. Last, but definitely not least, is the visual system. Not only is this system most interesting to me, but it's also extremely important for balance and dizziness. Vision takes in information about what is around us in space relative to our eyes. The separate strands of information sent to the brain from these three sources have to line up. If they don't, the sensory mismatch can result in dizziness and loss of balance. I can create this dizzy sensation in my office with special goggles that, while allowing you to see clearly, distort the signals that your eyes send to your brain and consequently change how you perceive depth and space. Sometimes that helps parents or caregivers understand what the patient is going through. We call them goggles of empathy. When I make you wear those goggles, I'm not altering any information coming from your joints and muscles or from your inner ear. I'm only toying with information from the eyes, but that is enough to muck up the brain's ability to keep you feeling balanced and stable and standing comfortably upright. My initial testing on Abby showed me that she had no concept of what was straight in front of her. If I asked her to put her finger right in front of her nose, it was way off to one side. We call this a midline shift. It was also clear that her eyes could not stay lined up with each other, something known as unstable binocularity. It was evident she had a poor sense of depth and space. Once I was testing her, I started to feel excited about the prospect of being able to help. I could tell her mom was not convinced, however. I couldn't blame her. They'd been absolutely everywhere, and no one had been able to help. But even that first day, I was able to alleviate some of the dizziness with a set of lenses. They had a small plus prescription, prisms embedded in the glass to bend light in the desired way, and, I'm not kidding, bits of semi-opaque tape in the areas near her nose. For a bit more on lenses, see Chapter 7. Taping the lenses like this is called binasal occlusion, and it reduces the overlap in information coming from her two eyes. In general, the more overlap, the more your brain has to sort out, and the less overlap, the less potential for confusion. Though, in truth, getting occlusion wrong can actually make things worse. Once I put together the right lenses for Abby, her brain was able to make more sense of her visual world, meaning that it had more reliable information to integrate with her vestibular and proprioceptive systems. That's when she told her mother that she suddenly didn't feel as dizzy. Abby went home that day with a prescription for the altered lenses. Typically, eye doctors are taught that prisms should only be used to correct a misalignment of the eyes, and that, used in the wrong way, they can make the eyes dependent on them. But prisms can be used to do other things too, like change depth perception of space, which is how I was using them here. Throughout her treatment, those lenses changed 4 times, in keeping with how her perceptions changed and improved. I suggested Abby work with me for 25 weeks of vision therapy. Again, I didn't know what to extent vision was the source of her problems, but I could tell it was at least a significant contributor. I knew her visual problems were hindering any recovery. She started her therapy the very next week. Abby thought most of what we were doing was weird, dropping golf balls on different tees and answering strange questions about what she was seeing through an array of lenses. But although she didn't always know why these things were helping, she admits that they were. Abby's mom describes her progress as gradual, but looking back, I think it was pretty quick. Usually, we start to see improvement anywhere from week 6 to week 15, depending on a person's response to lenses. But within 4 weeks, Abby was walking on her own again. Not long after, her mom remembers seeing her go to the bathroom on her own and not needing to touch the wall as she went. Abby had started treatment in May, and throughout the summer, she felt better and better. By September, she was no longer dizzy at all. She was back in school full-time. Believe it or not, she was skating again. I didn't realize how quickly she would rebound once vision was addressed. We actually ended therapy early because her improvement was so much faster than expected. Sometime near the beginning of her treatment, Abby's family doctor had called the family to say she knew they were doing vision therapy with me. She wanted them to know that she did not support them in this decision. It was interesting, given that this kid had been suffering from a debilitating problem and getting worse, and no one had been able to help her until now. This is a surprisingly common reaction. I've had a lot of doctors express their disapproval of vision therapy. And as I said earlier, I understand where they're coming from since I used to think the same thing. I was taught in optometry school that vision therapy is essentially quackery. It wasn't until later, when I actually dove into the underlying neurology and research, that I changed my mind. A lot of doctors I know have come around in the end, too, after witnessing the improvements firsthand. Some are even my patients now. But we never did hear if Abby's former doctor ever changed her views on vision therapy. I would hope she would at least take another look at it, review the science, and give it a chance. Among the many possible causes for dizziness are head injuries, neck injuries, vestibular system problems, heart problems, diabetes, complications from medication, and, of course, problems with vision. All these things need to be considered when a person presents as dizzy. That last one, vision, is the only thing that I can really help with, but it's an important component of balance and so often a major contributor of dizziness. Ironically, vision is seldom fully investigated. That's despite the fact that there has been a lot of scientific work showing that we rely heavily on our vision to keep us upright. Even 19th century doctors noticed that we have a harder time keeping our balance in the dark or when we close our eyes. More recent studies have shown that vision is our rock when information is conflicting or uncertain. One study looked at balance in older people while they stood on hard floors versus foam mats. On hard floors, they were able to keep their balance even if they had poor vision. But on the foam, when information coming from the feet was less reliable, people needed good vision to keep themselves steady, and if they didn't have it, they swayed more. Then there was a delightful study that involved movable walls. Back in the 1970s, experimental psychologist David Lee and his colleagues at the University of Edinburgh wanted to find out just how critical vision was to maintaining balance. So he built a little room where the floor stayed still, but the walls could be silently and stealthily moved. In a series of experiments, the researchers moved the surrounding walls of the room just 6 millimeters back and forth, while people stood in various stances. They used an instrument called a sway meter to measure how people's bodies reacted. They found that, even though all the mechanical evidence from people's ears, feet, and bodies was telling them that they were not moving, they still swayed as though the floor under their feet was shifting. In short, when there was a conflict about balance, the information from their eyes won out. The subject is like a visual puppet, the authors wrote. His balance can be manipulated by simply moving his surroundings without his being aware of it. The reaction was due to something called optical flow, that is, the way the pattern of light entering the eye changes when we move, said Janet Powell and Nancy Torgerson, writing about the study in the book Vision Rehabilitation. By the way, I highly recommend this book. I keep a copy handy at all times. Optical flow helps us figure out where we are in space, whether or not we're moving, and if we are, whether we're going toward or away from the thing we're looking at. Vision is used to give advance notice of what actions you might need to take in response to your changing environment. Not that long ago, I got a call out of the blue from Alex, who had been my bookkeeper back when I first started out. She was self-employed, single mother of 2 in her 40s, and for about a year, she told me now, she had been suffering from severe dizziness. It had started the morning after a strenuous game of tennis. Lying in bed, she noticed the world was spinning around her. When she stood up, it felt like the floor was moving up and down under her feet, almost as though she was on a boat. What started as annoying and irritating quickly progressed to debilitating. Within weeks, she could not get off the couch. The TV had to be turned away so she wasn't exposed to motion because motion made her throw up. Her kids had to speak one at a time in quiet voices. She had unrelenting headaches, neck pain, tremors, and tingles in her arms and legs. She often stuttered and at times was unable to speak at all. Doctors had ruled out infection, a brain tumor, and multiple sclerosis, but at the time she came to see me, she was still living under the shadow of a Meniere's disease diagnosis, a degenerative inner ear disorder that involves dizziness and eventually leads to total hearing loss. That too was eventually overturned, but it's worth noting that Meniere's patients can also often be helped by vision therapy. She had a long history of both migraine and hypothyroidism, which had worsened during her ordeal. But no one knew quite what this was. One doctor actually told her that she shouldn't expect to feel good all the time. Another lectured her about what it meant to be an aging female. By the time she came to see me, she was feeling hopeless and scared. She'd given up driving and could barely leave the house. If she managed to walk a few paces down the road, someone would have to pick her up in a car and bring her back. Her parents had sold their house up island and moved nearby in order to help. She'd cut her business to the bone. You're sitting on the couch, staring at the walls, she says, looking back on that time. You're seeing your life disappear. I felt awful for her. It was bad. Part of me was annoyed, though, because all the signs indicated that visual issues were messing up the integration of her visual and vestibular inputs. How had no one noticed? There was her extreme sensitivity to all kinds of motion. There was her nausea. There was her difficulty looking at a computer screen. She reported knocking things over a lot and dropping things, like her keys. On my assessment, she had some extreme responses to those tests, including the pattern glare test, which is a set of black and white lines that reveal a lot about vision's role in headaches. As well, her eyes over-converged. She couldn't find her midline, and her 2 eyes did not work well together. The first thing I did was prescribe new lenses. The The prescription she had for distance wasn't working for her at the computer because it was making her eyes turn in too much or over-converge. It was as though her eyes were pigeon-toed. And just as 2 feet turn in too much cause problems in the knees and hips, eyes that turn in too much can cause problems with balance and motion sensitivity. My aim in changing Alex's lenses was to place the least possible strain on her already overtaxed visual system. I wanted her to have good visual posture to make sure her eyes were in the right position relative to one another. She'd been using moderate distance lenses, but I decided to prescribe bifocals for use at the computer, with the top of the bifocal ideal for using at her screen and the bottom ideal for reading and near work. That way, she could change back and forth at her desk without causing symptoms. I had to explain that the symptoms don't always come on right away, but often accumulate over the course of the day, like a sunburn. I knew that some of her other problems, like not being able to go out on her own and not being able to watch things in motion without feeling sick, might have seemed more immediate and daunting. But I also understood that she needed to be able to work and support her family, and it was something that I felt I could improve pretty much on the spot. Taking care of what was happening at her computer was also essential to treating the whole problem. The equivalent of telling a patient with back pain that they had to start sitting correctly at their desk. In other words, if how she was using her eyes was contributing to the problem, then every time she looked at her computer, she could be undermining any progress she might make with vision therapy. The funny thing about Alex was that, even though she knew me, even though she had sought me out for help, she was such a hard sell on vision therapy. She left after that first appointment, crossing her fingers that the glasses alone would do the trick. But a few months later, she came back in. She was still incredibly suspicious, but was thinking about giving vision therapy a try. In the end, I made her a bet, promising that if she didn't get better, she wouldn't have to settle her bill. I was very confident I would win. Sure, I couldn't do anything to fix the inner ear, but I wasn't sold on the idea that all her symptoms were due to an inner ear problem. Visual problems are often mistaken for vestibular problems. It looked to me like her visual system was feeding garbage into her brain, just as though she was wearing my set of trick goggles. So of course, her visual and vestibular systems weren't calibrated well. If we could straighten that out, a lot of her balance issues might go away. For Alex, there's no question that treatment made her feel much worse before she started to feel better. The word she uses to describe that early phase is grim. She says she felt 10 times worse during therapy. She remembers that there were some exercises she simply couldn't do at first. Like peripheral work, she'd get a migraine aura and crippling head pain. She thought quite seriously about quitting, but a former patient of mine counseled her to stick with it. It took her a full 3 months to turn the corner. Even then, she played down her progress. I remember at one appointment she sat there complaining that her life still sucked. Her mom was there on that day too and called her on it. She rattled off all the things that were better. Alex was now able to go to the grocery store without her mother's help. She was able to go out in the world for longer stretches, and there were more days when she felt she could do something rather than nothing. Her mother told her that maybe she just didn't notice because the improvement was so incremental, but from the outside, it was obvious. It's surprisingly common for patients not to recognize their own improvement because they are focused on the fact that there are still symptoms. But family members and coworkers can often see what the patient can't see, that the symptoms are fewer and less severe, and that the capabilities are greater. Alex's recovery took 9 months in total. Yes, she still gets a very occasional dizzy spell, but it never lasts long. She still gets migraines, too, though many fewer. But when she asked to compare the self that first came in to get help with the self that walked out at the end, she says the former is unrecognizable.